Picture this, you and your neighbor have always been close, sharing sugar, watching pets, the works. Then, suddenly, they build a giant fence and demand a hefty fee just to pass a cup of syrup. That's what happened between the US and Canada in July 2025. President Trump hiked tariffs on Canadian goods to a staggering 35%, shocking both countries. Tariffs are like a cover charge for selling products across borders. For decades, the US and Canada kept these low, making trade easy. But this new tariff was a bombshell, making everything from Canadian wood to cars instantly pricier for Americans. The White House justified it as a response to Canada's inaction and retaliation, though the reasons were murky. For Canadians, it felt like betrayal from their closest ally. This wasn't the first tariff spat, but the scale was unprecedented, a clear message play by my rules or not at all. The previous 25% rate already hurt, but 35% was a whole new level. The world watched, wondering, would Canada retaliate or build its own fence? The friendly wave across the border had turned into a slammed door. The question, how would Canada respond to this economic shock? Would they fight back, or take a different path? The stage was set for a dramatic shift in North America's closest relationship. How did this neighborly barbecue turn into a food fight? It's a story of clashing leaders and simmering tensions. On one side, Donald Trump, dealmaker and provocateur. On the other, Mark Carney, Canada's new calm ex-banker prime minister. Trouble escalated in early 2025 when Trump accused Canada of not stopping fentanyl at the border, then linked it to trade. The rhetoric got heated. Trump even joked Canada should become the 51st state, hardly a crowd-pleaser north of the border. At the G7 summit in Alberta, the two leaders smiled for cameras and set a 30-day deadline for a new deal. But behind the scenes, talks stalled. The deadline passed and Trump imposed the 35% tariff. Reports say he even ignored Carney's calls afterward. Negotiations collapsed. What was supposed to be a path to a new deal became a cliff, taking the Canada-US trade relationship with it. The handshake at the G7 evaporated, replaced by silence and suspicion. The breakdown was total, a classic case of one side flipping the table instead of talking. The world's longest undefended border suddenly felt a lot less friendly. The economic fallout was immediate, but the diplomatic damage ran even deeper. The question, could the relationship recover, or was this the start of a long, cold standoff? The answer would depend on what Canada did next. Would they retaliate or chart a new course? The world waited for Canada's move. Everyone expected Canada to hit back, tariff for tariff, product for product. But Prime Minister Carney surprised everyone. Instead of retaliation, he announced a new strategy. Canada would pivot away from relying on the US market. No tit-for-tat tariffs, no trade war escalation. Carney declared it was time to reduce Canada's dependence on its southern neighbor. A bold move for a country that sends 75% of its exports to the US, he told Canadians. The old way is over. Trust has been broken. This wasn't anger, it was realism. Canada couldn't put all its economic eggs in one unpredictable basket. The decision was risky. Canadian businesses would feel the pain of US tariffs without hitting back. But Carney's gamble was clear: endure short-term pain for long-term independence. The strategy weathered the storm now: build a stronger, more self-reliant economy for the future. It was a fundamental shift. Canada was ready to rethink its place in the world. No more business as usual. The world took notice. Canada was charting its own course. The next step? Reinventing the Canadian economy from the ground up. So, what's the plan if you're not fighting back? Carney laid out a blueprint for a new Canadian economy. First, look inward. The government would help companies hit by tariffs innovate and adapt, investing in new products and markets. Second, look outward, but beyond the US, Canada would forge new trade routes with Europe, Asia, and South America. The message? The world is big, and the US isn't the only customer. Carney made this announcement at a lumber mill, symbolic, since lumber has long been a target of US tariffs. He stood with workers, promising real support, not just talk. This was about more than economics. It was about Canadian identity and resilience. The plan called for creativity, adaptability, and government partnership. It was ambitious, and it would take years, but it marked a shift from comfortable partnership to global independence. Canada was building something new, stronger, more self-sufficient, and ready for the world stage. The reinvention had begun. These tariffs aren't just numbers, they hit real people and industries. The auto sector is deeply cross-border. A 35% tariff disrupts everything, threatening jobs in places like Windsor and Oshawa. Steel and aluminium, Canadian mills in Hamilton and Quebec face huge pressure as their products become less competitive. The lumber industry, already battered by fires and disputes, takes another blow, costing jobs and hurting rural communities. The ripple effect is massive. Trucking, equipment suppliers, local shops, all feel the pain. Beyond industries, the tariffs erode trust built over a century of partnership. Businesses hesitate to invest, and cooperation on security and the environment gets harder. The economic pain is real, but the damage to the friendship may be even greater. The world's longest undefended border suddenly feels like a wall. The question, can these communities adapt, or will the wounds linger? The answer depends on how quickly Canada can reinvent itself. In this saga, words mattered as much as policies. Trump's language was confrontational, painting Canada as an adversary, linking trade to the fentanyl crisis, and threatening consequences. His style: create a crisis, define an enemy, and play the savior. Carney, in contrast, was calm and resolute. Canada is not for sale, he told Trump, asserting independence without escalating. After the tariffs, Carney focused on hope and resilience, not anger. He aimed to unite Canadians, refusing to be drawn into a war of words. In a time of crisis, Carney's steady tone offered a vision of long-term strategy over short-term outrage. This isn't just politics, it's personal for millions. Canadians in factories, mills, and forests suddenly worry about their jobs and futures. Economic uncertainty means families tighten belts, delay purchases, and face a shaky future. A weaker Canadian dollar makes imports pricier, and government revenues could shrink, affecting services. Carney's diversification plan is inspiring, but it's a long-term fix. In the short term, pain is inevitable. Americans feel it too: higher costs for lumber, cars, and more. Supply chains unravel, prices rise, and jobs are at risk. Decades of cross-border cooperation are hard to untangle. Chaos and unpredictability hurt both sides. The trade war meant to protect could end up harming the very people it claims to help. The cost isn't just economic, it's the fraying of a historic friendship. The challenge? Can ordinary people weather the storm while leaders search for a new path? Where do we go from here? The Canada-US relationship stands at a crossroads. One path, the crisis deepens, pain grows, and the two countries drift further apart. Or economic pain in the US could force a rethink, maybe even a return to talks. Even if tariffs are lifted, the trust is broken. Canada won't go back to old levels of dependence. Most likely Canada keeps diversifying, building new partnerships. This change is now irreversible. Deep ties, cultural, historical, geographic, can't be erased by a trade war, but the relationship will be more cautious. Canada faces a test of resilience and creativity, asserting itself on the world stage. The US must reflect on what it means to be a good neighbor and global leader. The future of this storied friendship depends on finding a new way to walk side by side, even if not in lockstep. The coming years will be challenging, but they also hold promise for a more self-reliant, globally connected Canada. For both countries, this is a defining moment. The choices made now will shape North America for decades. The world is watching to see if these neighbors can rebuild trust, or if the fence stays up for good. Only time will tell if friendship or rivalry wins the day.